Howdy, my name is Elijah Donkoff. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been working as an occupational therapist for a little over 20 years. And I just want to talk a little about today about what it is to be an occupational therapist. What sets us apart and makes us who we are. I mean, physical therapy is obviously going to work on the physical aspects. They're going to look at a person, they're going to see what mechanically is wrong with them, and they're going to work on those aspects. Namely, walking is one of the big things that patients pay the most attention to, but they also cover shoulders and other items that are very physical and mechanical in function. They look at the muscles, they look at the nerves, they look at the kinesiology of the situation and how those muscles need to work, and they work on getting a person back up and moving pretty much from a standpoint of what muscles and bones aren't working and how can we get this to work. Now, as occupational therapists, we look at that as well, but that's not all we look at. We also look at the psyche of a person. Well, now we're talking about psychology. But we're not psychologists. Psychologists are going to sit and talk to a person about what mentally is blocking them and how they can become better if, they're not as depressed or they're not as dealing with whatever issues it is that they're dealing with that's causing them not to progress in their rehab. But we're more than a psychologist. Although psych is a great aspect that affects how we interact with our patients and what we teach them to do and how we teach them to do it. So then we start looking at the medical aspect. Well, medically, what's going on? Well, nursing takes care of a lot of that, typically. And they'll look at their medicines and the doctors as well, and what needs to be adjusted medically with them, and how can this medicine help them better or that medicine help them better. And these are things we'll address in our time working as occupational therapists. But that's not alone who we are. What is it that an occupational therapist brings that nobody else can bring? That's the question. And that's where our name, Occupational, comes into play. Oh, nowadays we look at it as, work. And trust me, I've had more than one patient in 20 years say, well, I'm retired, I don't work anymore. But we're not looking at work. We're looking at how they occupy their times. What is their occupation? Are they a father? Are they a mother? Are they a daughter, a sister, a husband, a wife, son? Do they like to fish? Do they like to hunt? Do they like to cook? Do they like to garden? Do they like to draw? Do they play music? And as we start looking at what they occupy their time with, we start having to look at all the aspects. Physically, what's affecting them. Mentally, what's affecting them. Medically, what's affecting them. Because if we don't address all of it, how can we help them get back to the things they occupy their time with? How can we help them return to the person that they want to be, the person they liked that they were before whatever has ailed them. And so we start addressing these issues, and we start addressing each one individually, and we consult with nursing, and we might consult with a psychiatrist or a psychologist. We might co-treat with a physical therapist. With self-feeding issues and goals, we may consult with a speech therapist. and co-treat with a speech therapist. We have a special niche, we have a special purpose, we have a special ability as an occupational therapist to help each individual. Our training is different than the others because a lot of things, if we need to know what's going on, we can look up on Google and MedMD and all these other sites that we now have at our fingertips on our phones as we're sitting there with our patients. We have a vast expanse of knowledge that's available through the internet now. But as OTs, what we bring is something beyond that. What we bring is problem solving. What we bring is intuition. What we bring is the hope, the dreams. The desire to return, because we're not just looking at, oh, I can get you walking again, or I can get your shoulder moving again. We're looking at, I can get you functioning again. We always look at what's the function. We may look at adapting things to make it to where they can do it. We may look at using adaptive equipment to help them to achieve that goal of who they are. And that's where our value begins to come in. Because I can look at a patient and I can do an evaluation, and on paper everything looks great, but I know something's wrong. And I know that there's something more to it that I can't put my finger on during the evaluation. And during those times, I'll pick the patient up, and sure enough, within a week, I'll know exactly why I did. Because intuition and problem solving situations and recognizing things sometimes comes from within, not necessarily what we're seeing externally. Problem solving is very, very important in our field as occupational therapists. I would say that one of the great aspects to problem solving is knowledge. Putting ourselves into their shoes, putting ourselves into what they're going through, empathy, but then figuring out, okay, what can I do that's going to make it better for them? What can I do to help their lives? We can focus so much on one small aspect that we miss the big picture. We got to listen, we got to hear, we got to see what they're talking about, we got to see what it is that matters to them, and then start using our knowledge and our wide base of education to help them to return to what they want. At the beginning, I brought up several things that patients do. I've had to study how to play a guitar to help a patient who'd had a stroke, who could still make the chords with his left hand but was having trouble holding a pick with his right. And all he wanted was to go back to playing guitar. I had a patient who, goodness, wanted to, they wanted to garden, they wanted to cook, they wanted to do all types of things that had brought them joy in their lives. And sometimes the problem solving includes just a lot of research, a lot of looking things up, a lot of what can I use to make this happen? How can this product be adjusted to help the patient? In ways, we're like medical MacGyvers at times, trying to figure things out. And sometimes, that's not even what the patient wants. We don't have to look at adapting things to that patient, because quite frankly, they don't want to spend the time doing it. I remember being told a story about a patient who had a spinal cord injury. I believe they were I can't remember if they were paraplegic or quadriplegic after, or if they suffered from paraplegia or quadriplegia after their accident. But they were unable to dress themselves. And so the OT was determined to teach them how to dress. The patient had zero desire to learn how to dress. The patient was a multimillionaire. He didn't need to dress himself. He was a extremely intelligent lawyer who his greatest power was his brain. And he wanted to get back to practicing law. And he wanted to know how he could do things around the office and take care of things around the office to practice law. Dressing didn't matter to him because, as he put it, I have enough money to pay someone to care for me 24 hours a day. I don't need to do those things. I need to do work. And I don't want to waste all my energy in a day dressing myself when I could use that energy to get back to work and doing what I love. So I bring that up to say, talk to your patients. Listen to your patients. What does your patient want? What's going to be, as I put it, and as I've heard put to me before, the shiny marble that they want, that they are going to grab onto, that's going to make them want to do the exercises, that's going to make them want to do what you're having them do to get better. How are you going to show them success? There's a verse in the Bible that the writer of many of the books of what we call the New Testament writes, where he says, I've become all things to all men that I may win a few. And as therapists, that's what we do. We become all things to all men. We become an expert, or at least a partial expert, in many, many different aspects of life. I find that in 20 years, I'm still learning all the time. My patients always want to tell me a story of how they got better, or actually what they did in the past. I joke sometimes that as a therapist, I'm a collector of stories. My patients have been men who created programs for NASA, wives of great military men, simple cowboys, simple housewives, people that live in ways that we don't think that people live in the United States anymore. All the way to, I've been in a $25 million mansion that was privately owned. They're all people. They're all the same. We get to talk to them, learn from them, listen to them, find out what it is that made them tick, find out what it is that made them who they are today. And how can we return them to that person? The multi-millionaire wanted to golf. The officer's wife just wanted to go sit outside and enjoy the weather again. She didn't want to stay in bed all the time. The gentleman who'd programmed and designed things that have greatly affected our lives by working for NASA, He'd retired and become a farmer, and he just wanted to farm again. He wanted to be able to run his ranch. Each person had something that they wanted to do and wanted to be once again. They no longer wanted to be trapped in who they were. And so we begin the process of task analysis and, again, problem solving each step of the task and where the breakdown is. Sometimes the breakdown's in multiple areas. And we start with the most basic and work our way up. So I hope this kind of gives a good beginning of what an occupational therapist is and what we can do. Thank you for your time.